Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story. Coworker did not fulfill his task and he was fired because I did not help him. The second story. I created a good site about a colleague to take revenge on him. And the first story is the only acceptable use of I don't feel like it. This is a story of justice. A tale of evil clients and knights in shining QA departments. The setting. Our company runs a set of databases with a light website for managing reports on data, all of which is used as a customer management system for a large number of clients that want to host websites, but don't want to manage a database to sit behind it. The heroes. I work as a lowly QA tech in a QA department of about 8. I've been working in this place for about 5 years now, and I'm frequently asked to sit in on calls with clients. They trust me enough now to leave me to get on with things and communicate with the client directly if there's anything I want to ask about. My boss is a certified legend with a degree from the College of How to Earn Respect. The guy lets me get on with my work and take care of all the business side and interdepartmental politics. Great boss. My good friend, who we'll call Greg, works as a fairly senior member of the customer support department. Greg's got my back and I've got his. If he has something come through that he needs help with or looks serious, then I'll help him out. The villain, the client's project manager, who we'll imaginatively call D, was tasked with being the gateway for all communication with us, and was either extremely vague or mathematically incompetent whenever he discussed the requirements for what would be delivered. When paired together, these things often mean that bad things will happen. To make things worse, this guy was intentionally insulting because he could get away with it. After all, he is a paying customer. The pledge. The client paid us for a piece of work where we made a custom API, which we exposed on our SOAP interface. It was a good feature, and one which our sales representatives had probably been told to try and get a client to fund for quite some time. Implementing it was a nightmare, because they had added some complex functionality in their requirements document just before they signed it off. All my best attempts to try to resolve inconsistencies and make it work logically fell on deaf ears and eyes that refused to read emails. One exchange with D on this topic went thus. Me, hi D, it's Derp at company. Just calling about D. Oh hi, yeah, the slacker at company. How's it going? It should be pointed out that we were slightly behind schedule because there were a number of outstanding issues in the database procedure behind the call. Hence why this was obviously my fault. Me biting my tongue. I'm okay, thanks. Just calling about your requirements on the API which you sent through. D. Oh, this again? Haven't you finished that yet? Me. Well, no, you'll remember that we've delayed it due to some issues with the procedure, which you've been informed. D. Oh, for the love of... why is it taking so long? Me. That's what I wanted to ask about. Requirement 6.5.12 says it's supposed to calculate X, but lower down it states the maths you want it to use. The problem is that this equation doesn't actually represent that value. D. Look, you're supposed to follow the specification I've written, so just do it. I don't want to hear about this again until it's done. The next day, my boss tells me that D complained about me to his account manager, saying that I was being offensive and was questioning his competency. He can read minds? I then completed this piece of work, ensuring that his specification was followed to every exact instruction. The turn. After the best part of 6 months, and the client is about to go live with their site, they've been trying to sort out their own internal testing teams and third parties for such a long time that we ended up completing the work a full 5 months before they were even able to test it. And at this point, they were going live in 3 days, because that's when their marketing campaign said it would. Because of these tight deadlines, they signed it off on our acceptance testing sandbox, and we considered the work to be complete. I had all but forgotten that previous conversation with D. About 3 p.m. Friday afternoon, Greg from CS calls me up saying he's got an issue with D. Greg now knows firsthand how D can be. This is because after our work was completed and promoted to our live system, any issues they had integrating were not development issues, but customer support issues. I make my way over to CS land, and this is where things get fun. Me, sup Greg, sipping my coffee because these usually involve a long conversation about the functionality of features. Greg, hey Derp, you ever worked on this new API that went up for client name? Me, yeah, I did the verification process on it. What do you want to know? Greg, the client seems to think it doesn't work. Me, it was implemented to the letter. Plus, other clients have been picking it up and using it since it went out, haven't they? Greg, yeah, that's what I thought when I read the documentation. Okay, leave it with me and I'll let D know. I head back to my desk and start pulling out all the documentation I have on this feature, because I know exactly what's coming next. After not too long, Steve, the account manager for D, storms into QA and straight into boss's office. There's a lot of shouting and raised voices, and eventually I'm called in. Steve, would you care to explain this? Steve points at an email on boss's screen. I go in for a closer inspection, and it's an email from D claiming that their launch is probably going to be a disaster because the API has obviously not been tested at all. I'm surprised Steve believes this because he knows me, and I've worked on various projects for him in the past. Me, I was firmly told by Mr. D that I was to implement it to the specification. Steve, but the reporting section of the response that comes out is utter nonsense. Doesn't make sense. Boss, Derp, what did the specifications say about this? Me, I can grab the documentation from my desk if you like. Boss, I think that would be a good idea. I go and fetch the documents, and all the eyes in the department are on me, wanting to know what's going on. On the way back, I see Boss trying to calm Steve down. Me, here it is. I slide it across the desk and take a seat. Steve and Boss scan through it and find where it talks about these reporting figures, and wait to be spoken to. Steve turns a little pale, and Boss smiles. Steve, but that makes no sense. Me, I know. Steve, why didn't you raise this with the client? Me, I did. I then was accused of insulting the client's project manager and calling him incompetent. Boss, who wrote this specification? Me, D over on their side did. I'm pretty sure you two would have been CC'd on the email when it came across. Steve, well, what are we gonna do? We have to fix this before they go live on Sunday. It's now 3:45 Friday afternoon. Boss, no chance. We only release new code on Monday or Tuesday, unless it's a priority 1 issue. Even then, this is an API that multiple clients are now using, and we'll have to be careful not to break their integrations. Me, Steve, you might want to look at section 21 on that document. Steve quickly flicks to this section of the documentation, where the final clause states how any modification to this constitutes as a change request and chargeable work. Steve is much more calm, because he knows his A is covered. That, and I've made him some serious commission from clauses like that in the past. Steve, okay, wait there. Steve now stands a chance to make a considerable amount of commission. The client wrote the requirements, signed off the requirements, signed off the work and acceptance testing, and have only 32 hours before they launch. They'll be willing to pay a significant sum to fund the overtime required from personnel to get this straight. The prestige. It's 4:45, and I'm considering what I'll spend my weekend doing. Boss walks out of his office and comes over to me. Boss, can you just join me on a conference call? Me, if it's quick. Boss, that's up to you really. Intrigued, I follow him into his office, where I can hear a much more humble-sounding D on the phone, explaining to Steve what needs to be done. Boss, Steve, I have Derp here. Do you want to explain what the plan is? Steve, Derp, we really need to get this sorted. You worked on the original feature, so you'll know the best way to test this. We're still working on getting someone to develop the change, but we'll be willing to pay you triple time this evening and tomorrow to work on this for Sunday. We reckon we can do this patch without any impact to our other clients. D, I really need you to help me out here, mate. Otherwise, it'll really hit the fan over here. I pause and enjoy this brief moment of pure justice. Me, I've already made plans for this weekend. And D, Derp, seriously, you have to help me out here. Me, I don't really feel like it. D, well, someone needs to fix this. Boss, it's 5 p.m. on a Friday. Most staff are on their way home or out the door. Sorry, Steve, but it looks like it'll have to wait until next week. D rages down the phone, and once this torrent of abuse subsides, Steve lets me go back to my desk. I'm packing up for the end of the day and my phone rings. Me, company, Derp speaking. D, please, I need you to do this. Me, you need to sort this out, and calling me won't help you. D, please, I'm sorry, just help me out. Me, you've been extremely rude to me and insulted me whenever we've spoken. Your failure to listen to me is the sole reason you're here right now. I did exactly what you asked, and you've treated me with contempt every step of the way. I am not helping you. D, please. He's actually crying. You can hear it in the way his voice is all shaky. So I hang up and leave for the weekend. The end. Monday rolls around and Steve introduces me to a new project manager for the client, who's organizing the fix to the API. Steve, so Derp, this is Herb, another project manager for client name. Me, is D not working on this project? Herb, D no longer works here. The second story is, screw me over, I'll be screwing you for the foreseeable future. It started some years ago. The culprit, was a middle-aged C-level exec at my company. When I started working there, I was informed that culprit had some kind of grudge against the department I worked in. Not because he was wronged, but something he carried with him from his previous job. Even without the warning, culprit did a fine job of making it clear he was a D-bag. He had no experience either at the executive level or his department's function, a customer-oriented function ironically, and I found he'd falsified his resume, and his actions made it very clear. He mismanaged his staff to such an extent that the company lost $500,000 in just one instance, and he manipulated this to get a $30,000 bonus. Culprit was also the one-upper. If you told him your spaceship cost $24 billion, he'd say his cost 4 solar systems and an ocean of kitten blood. This is important. At every turn, Culprit blamed my department for his own shortcomings. He turned his staff against my department, and in a sadistic twist of fate, this legacy is directly responsible for much of the company's current failure. But that's another story. And in every single interaction with my department, Culprit found a way to be condescending, manipulative, irritating, and a roadblock to success. As an example, I scheduled a meeting with Culprit, 2 other C-levels, and knowledgeable guy in Culprit's department to discuss how to eliminate a massive problem his staff was creating. Massive as in causing the company to miss client appointments and pay out lots and lots of money. Culprit agreed to the meeting time, but canceled literally 2 minutes before, leaving the other C-levels and I hanging out in the conference room, which was perhaps 20 feet from Culprit's office. When the C-levels confronted him, by walking the 20 feet, he says he was busy with stuff. My blood is boiling even now. To avoid a heart explosion in front of my computer, please simply trust me on this. Culprit is a grade AAA twice-boiled rockstar level a-hole-pounding SH-eating douchebag. And his main target was my cohorts and me. Fast forward to quite some time later. By this point, my entire department had left the company. It was starting to tank, and Culprit had been laid off with a bunch of other people. I was hanging out with my old boss and coworkers when someone mentioned Culprit. Talk went from his D-baggery to his new job, to eventually how delicious it would be to exact some long-term subtle revenge. And dear reader, this is how the website was born. The Revenge. Of idle curiosity, I checked to see if www.culpritsfirstnameandlastname.com had been registered. Good golly, it wasn't. This I interpreted as a sign from on high, and you know what happens when those are ignored. Whale intestines, for those who don't know. Of course, I immediately purchased the domain name, paying for the next 10 years in a lump sum. Definitely worth it. Then I installed a crappy website framework and threw up a basic blog, about page and forum. All of these were liberally sprinkled with references to Culprit's first name and last name, socially frowned upon sexual proclivity, which was in fact both the site's title and the theme of the site itself. I wrote blog posts that mirrored Culprit's writing, grammar, and punctuation, and adhered to his self-professed level of technical skill. I seeded the forums with graphic conversations about socially frowned upon sexual proclivity. I set up the homepage so it displayed the top 20 explicit pictures from a Google image search for socially frowned upon sexual proclivity. I littered Culprit's first name and last name socially frowned upon sexual proclivity about the site like bird droppings at a seagull festival. Then, it went a step further. After setting up the domain registration to change to a different company every 3 days, I started searching for Culprit's name on the internet. Try searching for your own name. You'll probably get a bunch of spammy results from Spokeo, white pages, etc. Who knew that anyone can claim and edit those listings? So I claimed every listing I could find and set www.culpritsfirstnameandlastname.com as the homepage URL, using different throwaway email addresses. I even created profiles for Culprit on a few of the sites that didn't already have him, and linked to Culprit's new website. I can only imagine people casually Googling Culprit's name, clicking the seemingly innocent www.culpritsfirstandlastname.com link, and running horrified from the explicit pictures that show up on the homepage. It helps me sleep at night. Every once in a while, I Google Culprit's first and last name. Often, www.culpritsfirstandlastname.com comes up as the first or second result. Sometimes it's buried on the second page. Every time, though, I get warm fuzzies thinking about how permanent online information is, and how hard it is to remove something from the internet. Good luck, Culprit, getting anyone to take you seriously again. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.